Okay, guys, I think it's time to start. So it's my great pleasure to start the next seminar in the VGS IT series. This is the Vision, Graphics and Speech series. And our speaker today is András Lőrincz from Eötvös. Oh my God, this is difficult. Eötvös University in Hungary. And I'm actually grateful to Petra and to Olda, who made contact with András at one of the Humane AI-Net meetings or gatherings. So András actually is a professor habilitated at the University of Szeged on laser physics, and also in the field of informatics at Eötvös Loránd University. He's working in different domains, but I think we are going to hear about it. And he's directing a multidisciplinary team that is mainly into human-machine interaction. So it's my great pleasure to welcome András here. And I think this is where I stop, and I give you the floor. And thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. This is the second trial when I came here. And not this time I succeeded. In the previous case I wasn't that successful. So the title is Towards Human-Machine and Human-Robot Interactions, with a little help with my friends, or from my friends. That means that we cannot lose. That's what it means. But there are several things that we can do, and let me just say, can you hear me well?
Oh yes, thank you.
Okay.
In the room, is it okay?
But then I shouldn't move, right? I fix myself. So I have this group, the Neural Information Processing Group, and then recently a new department was established, the Department of Artificial Intelligence, which was co-founded by Robert Bosch Ltd, which is supporting the department. And within the department, we have 5 seniors, 2 programmers, 15 PhD students, and it's growing. I wrote this a few months ago, but now we have 19 PhD students, and we also have master's students. And we are leading the AI specialization within the Faculty of Informatics, and that's growing. It's doubling every year. Now we have 50 students, and it started just 2 years ago. And this is the 3rd year. And we have university partners. Basically, the department was established based on my group, and these are mostly my partners, like Barcelona University on personality estimation. I will talk about that. If I'm not talking clearly or you want to ask something, then please do that. I learned that I can go from 20 minutes to 90 minutes. It's up to you. And there's this Charles University. We had a joint project on natural language processing. They are from Prague. And the Delft University of Technology on group behavior estimation and prediction of the group behavior. And also within the human AI, which is led by DFKI, this is what you know. This is, we can find other partners. That's a very good direction. There are 53 participants from different universities and companies. And there's a strong connection with the Rush Medical School in Chicago, both in autism and post-traumatic stress disorder. And we have industrial partners beyond Bosch. One of them is Argus Cognitive, which is a startup, basically from my group. And also Martin Metals, which is they have a larger company in Hungary, and we have a joint project with them on a warehouse robot, and we do the image processing. And to position what I am interested in, I would like to show you the Gartner curve. I'm almost sure that everybody knows about the Gartner curve. If not, then it will be interesting. If you do, then sorry for repeating it. It's a very specific curve. It shows when technology is entering and gets onto the hype. When it's a hype, it gets higher and higher. And then at the top, then starts to decrease and goes to disillusionment trough. And then it gets very deep. People are just disappointed with the technology. Then eventually it goes to the product level. Okay? So this is the high part. Then there is the disillusionment the trough of disillusionment, and then this is the plateau of productivity. And then it's colored. The different topics are colored on it. And if it's dark blue, that means 5 to 10 years. If it's orange, I'm not sure that it's not that orange, but this should be orange. The color is not that perfect. Then autonomous vehicles and computer vision are there. That people are just disappointed. I mean, then it says that it's more than 10 years, and people are very disappointed with those technologies. This is 2021. It's changing, by the way. And if it's white, then the technology will be ripe in less than 1 year, and the chatbots what we are working on is there. And then, beyond that, the field, what I'm interested in, is composite AI, which is getting hyped. Composite AI means that you are using deep technologies, deep learning methods, and you are combining those. Just like what we do in the school. Whatever we learn in the school, we don't use deep learning there. We combine things together. Okay, so that's a different story. Combining deep learning for me are kind of sensors, and then combining the different deep learning tools, that's composite AI. I will show you some examples on that. And human-centered AI is also hyped. Intelligent applications are going down. People are just disappointed about those a bit. Deep learning and machine learning are also going down. But these are all light blues, colored by light blue, meaning that they will be, products are expected in 2 to 5 years. That was in 2021. And all of these light blue parts are needed for the topic what I'm interested in. They are all needed for human-machine, human-robot collaboration and interaction. And this field is pushed pretty much. So let's see what is pushing it. And this is a direction that we have been taking. That's physical rehabilitation scenario. I will show you some examples, but let's see first what the field is about. Elderly people need such help in rehabilitation. And the business part, the estimated amount for 2027 was $225 billion per year. So the market is big for that single application. There are many other applications there. But it is expensive. So, for example, 1 hour with an expert would take about 10,000 forints in Hungary, maybe more. You need to divide by 400 to get it in euros, and I'm sorry, I don't know the Czech money. But it would be something like 25 euros or a little bit more. There is a demand. There will be a demand for machine assistance. And the machine assistant needs verbal interaction, and, for example, about the environment, where to go, how to go there, what to do there. A semantic map or instance map, I will talk about those later, what those are. And also it needs real-time performance, and that's very important. In addition, the cloud service may not be allowed because of privacy reasons. So you need something which goes very fast, real-time, and it should be potentially mobile application because these elderly people cannot afford high-quality computers. And the interaction is complex. For us, these are trivial. They are trivially looking. But the problem is that they are very, very complicated. There are specific needs. I'm not sure. I hope you can read it. So how does a human look? Because only part of the human can be detected in some cases. But how does a human look? Where is the human looking at? You know, the gaze, where you are looking at, that's about intentions. And what does the human do? What is it walking, doing, manipulating something? These are also very important questions. And what do humans do together? Because sometimes you want to do something with a group of people, and what's going on within that group. And, well, in order to interact, you need to know how people typically interact, because you just cannot interact widely. You need to know what is the best way of interaction. And what could you do in such a case? And there's a very strong constraint that humans are very different. So to interact with one person, that should be very different from interacting with other person. In the academic environment, it's not so clear, but if you are dealing with for an autistic child or an adult with post-traumatic stress disorder, they need to have just very different treatments, very different interactions. And if you are in a group, then are you different from your own when you are alone, from yourself when you are alone? So, for example, we laugh together, we yawn together. If somebody starts to yawn, then we also yawn. But so what happens in a group? Are people different in a group? And they are. And what could or should a robot help? What is to be helped? And the need can come in different ways. For example, the need can come from the person. The person might ask for some help, or from the group. Or the need should go for the group or for the person, because the robot should, or the machine should figure out some help is needed at the same time the person cannot tell, or the group cannot tell. Or it should be against the group in some cases, or against the people, because sometimes in public spaces you might need to interact, and that should go against the person in some cases. And when we are talking about robots in the future, I mean the groups in the future, these groups can include robots also. And there are many, many application opportunities, and one note here, that human empowerment is one of the main topics in the European projects as of today, in the Horizon course. So one thing is called continuous health care. Examples include, I already mentioned, post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, depression, autism, dementia, or obesity, for example, but there are many. Or the security of home, shops, banks, and public spaces. You can imagine many, many different cases where you need to interact, you need to help, or you need to stop something. And cyber-physical systems with human in the loop. About 5 years ago, there was an accident in Volkswagen, and a robot hit a person, an assistant, and that was a death. That was a death case. And let me show you one example that shows how complex things are. Here are some few things that I tricked him, you tricked him, yes, okay, I told you, you bet, let's go, or this is a deal. But did you get it? I did get it. Bad boy. Just tell me which one is which one. And these are only about the eyes, okay, nothing else, but the eyes and the head is moving. And if you want to interact with these cases, then you need to know what they mean. Just consider one single example, this one. In this case, this lady is pointing with the eye, and then there's a wink. There's an eye pointing followed by a wink, and that means something, that out of this, you choose which one. You see a very fast blink to the right, and then a very fast eye gaze to the right, and then a blink. Okay, so just figure out what to do in this case if you are the robot. And there are other cases which show that these things are very complex. This is a painting, and in this case there are 4 people here, and they are playing cards, and the title is The Cheater. There's a cheater here, and what is happening, and what we have, having our prior knowledge, there's a whole story here, that possibly the maid, who is having this glass of bottle of wine, just came in, and possibly she has seen that this guy has 2 aces at the back, hiding. And she's possibly telling very quietly to the owner of the house, possibly the owner of the house, and with the gaze, it's a gaze pointing to the cheater, possibly. I'm just trying to explain what I see in this picture. At the same time, the owner of the house is having a very soft pointing by the hand. It's a causal pointing. It may not be a pointing at all. Possibly a question is, are you talking about that guy? Because there are 2 guys. Which one is cheating? And also, she's looking at the maid. So that's a story about 4 people and a whole history, which is, you might believe me or you might have a different interpretation, but one thing is for sure that this story is totally ununderstandable for autistic people. They see nothing there. And at the same time, but this is a question of thinking about episodes, putting the different components, considering the different components, and putting them together and to make up the story, and then to decide what to do next. So this could be a robot in this case, for example. But for autistic people, so we are making sense of this situation. That's very important, and this is almost an impossible job as of today for the robots, but it might come much easier for them in the near future, having specific tools. Making sense for autistic people, it's not a problem in such cases. The IQ can be very large. I mean, most of the 50% of autistic people have normal IQ or better IQ than typical, than the average. And so this part, to solve what should we put here, that's very easy for them. And the difference here is between the variables. And the variables of hidden parameters. In this case, the parameters are not hidden. You just need to figure out the rules between the different components. But then everything is basically hidden, even whether it's a pointing or not, the hand pose a pointing or not, that's kind of hidden. Whether it's pointing to somebody, that's not that easy. Not mentioned, this is a three-dimensional situation in a two-dimensional picture, again, very hard for a computer. So it's not that easy what we are after. And if you are talking about a single person, there's a general need. There are different needs for that. Verbal communication is critical. It's typically a must because it's very compressed, and that can be very quick and sometimes winded. Sometimes with just gesturing can be faster, and sometimes the combination can be unique and can disambiguate the situation. But in order to enable verbal communication, the machine should know about the environment, should be able to name different objects in the environment, follow and help the execution of the task, ongoing task. We are talking about a task here because the machine is not for entertainment but for task solving. And also need to know about the partner's movement, manipulations, and other activities. And mood, emotion, whether the person is angry or happy, because that requires a different interaction. And should take part in the optimization of the collaboration and also to make compromises. Nothing else. Any question? So you believe me? Let me start with the semantic map. In this case, maybe a little robot or with a smartphone, you can walk around in the apartment, and then together with the depths that you can measure with this time of flight smartphones, for example, you build up a three-dimensional map, semantic map of the environment. It's called semantic map because the objects get their own colors, so chairs are colored differently, and then the table or the sofa or the window or the table. It becomes a semantic map, and then this is we have published that, and the other people are also working on that. I think the button cannot be seen here. Oh, it can be, okay. So this was the publication last year. And then the semantic map can be used in different ways. One very important thing that this way, if I can measure the head, the position of the head of the person, and I know the head pose, then I know what the person can see from that direction. I can position the virtual camera in this world into that position, and when I say I mean the robot, and the robot can consider what the person sees in egocentric coordinates. So then it can tell that go to the right, or at your right hand, or just behind you. That's a prerequisite for verbal communication. This is how we communicate, and this is how you understand the communication. If I want to tell you something that in front of you on the table, find something, this is what I tell, I don't tell 5 meters from me on the table, because then you cannot do anything with that. In addition, because it's a three-dimensional world, it's also good for path planning, to guide the person to somewhere. For example, in the case of dementia, it could be a must, could be very important. And then the components for characterizing the patient state, what we are having and what we are putting together now, are the full body estimation for more than one person, full body, even the relative position, and the head and hand positions and configurations, object in the hand and detecting manipulations, eyes and blinking, gaze direction and blinking. Gaze, as I mentioned, that's about intention. And behavior estimation, like emotion, that's well known, that has been done by many people, but also something called perceived personality, what I will explain because that's relevant for the interaction. And then in the case of software tools, we are having just, I believe everybody's are having, you are having the same things, tracking, information fusion, and what I mentioned before, the combination of deep neural networks, including those into higher level knowledge, and which is the composite AI method. So let's see this perceived personality, what it is. Personality is good for optimizing collaboration. So there are different personalities, and they are measured in many different ways, and the big five is the most popular. I'm almost sure that maybe a few of you have heard about that, but many of you haven't. So this is the most popular, and these are the main characteristics, like openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, which is the opposite of emotional stability. Altogether, these are called the ocean parameters. I think it's ocean in both in Hungarian and in your language too. And these are the 5 main parameters. How people do that people make a self-assessment. You have a questionnaire, you fill out the question, and then you get points, and given the points, you get the combination points in all of these 5 dimensions, and that's it. It's a static measure, so it's about you and what you think about yourself according to the past. That's your belief about yourself. But during interaction, it can change. You can become angry or neurotic, or you can become more agreeable with other people, depending on who your partner is. So that's not good for the robot to interact. You need to have a better description of the actual personality, which is called perceived personality, because ocean parameters may change quickly. And this is what you see. This is called perceived personality, or there are methods that are called first impression. So if you enter a room or you meet somebody, then within maybe 1 minute, you have an idea about the personality of that person. It might be right, might be wrong, and that it might change because that's already an interaction. But that's called perceived personality if you measure it by time. But if it's a first impression because you meet that person first, then it's your first impression. So here are a few examples. This is the so-called Challearn database. This is where you will not hear what they are talking, but it's not so important. They talk differently. These are 4 examples here about out of more than 10,000 vlogs. Vlogs are video blogs, and they were measured using Amazon Turk. They were given relative ocean values, and given those relative ocean values, then the real ocean values were estimated as a specific database, and this data were collected by the Barcelona group, whom we have been collaborating with. And then we trained a deep transformer-based fusion architecture with 10,000 vlogs, and we tested those, then on the rest, on others. Okay, how well they are working. And this way, we have 15-second estimations, or even we can have shorter ones, estimations in time, and we can see how they are changing. And I'm not going to go into details with the architecture, but because this is well known. Sorry. The basic architecture is from Carnegie Mellon University. If you are familiar with this topic, that's the Morency group who did that. We made some minor changes to that, We use the linear attention mechanism in this transformer network. I'm not going into theoretical details. This linear attention is easier to train and requires much less memory. It's not quadratic as the normal transformers. And these are cross-modal characterizations between the three modalities, which are all important: the text, the acoustic information like prosody, and the visual information. It turns out the speech, the prosody, and the text are the most important. Visual information adds something to that, but not too much. Let's see few details what we could figure out about perceived personalities. Well, of course, it may differ in different groups. And it also could be a function of the task performed. There are several databases like ELEA, the Emergent Leader Analysis, and also UDIVA, which is collected, is a dyadic group, only 2 people are there, and there are 5 different tasks there, and that was collected again by the Barcelona group, or AMI, I don't know what is the shorthand, what it stands for, and Multissimo, that we could analyze. And I will show results on the reliability of our estimations. Sorry. And I will show some details on 2 meta traits. These 2 meta traits are the combinations of the 5 ocean parameters, like agreeableness, conscientiousness, and emotional stability, which is the opposite of neuroticism. That's one. It's called stability, and also plasticity, which is extraversion and openness. The sum of just the normal sum of those, nothing else, because then I can show you 2-dimensional figures, because there are just 2 parameters here. But first, let's see the Multissimo database. We did not analyze that, but we used that for checking the quality of our work, because in that case, they had a perceived personality. They asked 8 experts, 8 raters, to tell what they think about these agreeables, whatever the 5 different parameters. And we normalized our architecture, our output, to the average of what they are doing. And then what you see here are the discrepancies from the average. So for example, in this case, the 40th session, this is our estimation, and this is the difference of our estimation and the average. And these are the differences between the individual raters' estimations and their own average, which means that we are always closer to the average estimation of them, except the extraversion, which seems a little bit harder to estimate, but in general, we can do about as well as those 8 raters average out. So our estimations are pretty reliable. And then I show you an example on the ELEA database. This is a 2-dimensional graph about plasticity and stability, and these are the individuals. So this guy had 1.25, for example, on plasticity, and 1.72 on stability. These are his values. And there are 63 people, 63 participants in 17 groups. Okay, these are 63 points. And let's see how the groups look when we take a look to them. So this is one group, the red dots. The gray dots are the same gray dots, and the 4 dots are the 4 members of one group. Another example, third one, fourth one, and so on. There are a few examples here.
I'm sorry, what are these groups?
They are working together a specific task. The story is that there was a crash with an aeroplane, and they want to collect objects to escape. And they want to decide the list of objects and want to decide what to take. Okay? And then the question of this experiment was, who is the emergent leader of the group when they questioned the people? Okay, but before the whole experiments, they took these self-assessments. And what you see here on the stability plasticity is their own self-assessments. Okay? So it's task-related, it's considered a serious task, and then this is what you see. So thank you for the question. So these groups look like if they were just sampled, random, from the original distribution. Okay, just you have the distribution, take randomly in different things and put them together into 3 or 4 member groups. But then the distribution is very different for the perceived personality. Again, what you see is plasticity and stability. It's much narrower. Well, that's understandable because it's a specific task. It's not every dimensions of our life. And this just task related, so it could be narrower. Why not? It should not show very different distribution. It could be much narrower. But looking at the groups, this is the surprise. The red dots again show our estimations on the perceived personalities. And these don't look like if they were sampled. They are much, much closer to each other. They are not sampled. These people, the perceived personality becomes very similar for these people.
Sorry, can I ask?
Please, please, please.
Stability correlated with plasticity, should they be the opposite of correlated? So why is stability correlated with plasticity so obvious?
Why would it be opposite?
So like in your scheme, the people have higher stability, they also have higher plasticity?
Within a task-oriented case.
Okay.
Don't ask me why. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. Maybe I should be, I have no idea. These are data. I don't know why.
Okay.
It's a good question, but I have no idea. Why stability correlates so well with plasticity.
Because it just seems that there are people that are better at everything, people that are worse at everything, which is kind of weird. Okay, fine.
So these measures on the left ones are the self-assessment.
Self-assessment, you think about yourself.
On the right, this is again some self-assessment?
No. This is perceived what our algorithm estimates.
Okay.
And what I showed to you in the previous slide on Multissimo database, that our estimation is pretty good compared to the average of 8 raters. So this is, if you get the 8 raters, that possibly would provide you something very similar. Maybe the distribution could be, the STD, the standard for the groups could be larger, because our estimation is pretty good, better than what they do on average. But that is very specific. This is a very specific thing. So it means that, please.
Please finish your point before
Maybe.
I'm about to ask something.
Yeah, please answer.
Okay. Because since you are saying that these dots get closer together in that task that the group has to solve, isn't this something that could be expected? Because people need to work together, definitely they need to collaborate because they don't want their plane to crash. And so there might be some person who kind of takes over the lead and the others are trying to adapt as most as possible for the getting out of the situation in a good way for everyone.
Thank you very much. Very good note. It is known that there's something called group effect also. So people tend, in a group, they tend to behave similarly.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been known that you couldn't have measured it on personality. And there's a big difference here, that group effect, AFFECT, is not predictive of group performance. But group personality is capable of making a reasonable estimation about the performance of the group, which is the next slide.
Okay.
So there's some advantage in using group personality as opposed to group affect, because that means nothing. We can be laughing, we can be angry, and says nothing about the performance of the group, but the personality, the specific thing that stability and plasticity are correlated. I don't know why, but you can measure how well you can estimate group performance, and then that estimation is reasonable. So personality has some advantage here.
I guess this during the task execution, do you also have like ground truth like committee reviewers? Is this in general what people perceive when they look at groups, this type of distribution? This is from your algorithm, correct? But have you also seen it actually in the 8 reviewers predict maybe something around the same?
There is no. It has not been known. We just submitted this paper.
Yeah.
It has not been known that group can. It looks like a group has a personality, a perceived personality, but it has not been known before. It could have been expected because the group affect, because that they are similar. But the personalities that it comes together, it hasn't been known. And for the group personality, there is no present human estimation. But these estimations are not about the group personalities. These are the estimations about the individuals' perceived personalities, which happen to be grouped. So there's no ground truth there, and I don't know how to do the ground truth either.
Well, wouldn't you just have the 8 reviewers while they're doing the task? Try to then estimate, well, you probably want fresh reviewers not to be biased, right? Try to estimate them while they're doing the task there.
That's a different story. In the case of the 8 reviewers, they were looking at the multisimal database, and they were looking at individual, just one person. Yeah. And they gave the date, the number of that person. They did not look at the interaction. And they looked at the other person, and they gave their estimation of the other person. They made individual estimations, nothing about the group. In the multisimal database, and we use that for estimating the quality of our method, and it turns out what I showed to you before, the error we are making, the error distribution is better than their average. It's better than any of them individually.
Can you say something about how the data looked like? What were the input to the automatic system? So was it video of the people working together, or what was the input that you estimated?
These 3 different fused information pieces: the acoustic information, the textual information, and the visual information. In the case of the visual information, we wanted to avoid the influence of the environment, so we used action units. And in the case of speech, we used Roberta. The text, we used Roberta. And for the acoustic information, we used the EG maps. Reprocessing, and then that was the input to the transformers, with the cross-modality transformers and then the joining of those.
So the input was really the single person specific, that couldn't be influenced from the other people in the group?
No, everything was separate. Speech was separated, face was separated, everything was separated. And in the general case, such a separation becomes a big problem. So the first part of the talk is about what we can do, and the last part is what you cannot do, but you can. So one can say that groups develop group personalities, and that these group personalities can be very different because they cover the whole range. This is a small part there, but the whole range is much larger in a specific task. And we also did work on the UDIVA database, within which there are 5 different tasks, and only one of them is task-oriented. And in that we did find the group effect, which is very interesting because it's about a dyadic interaction. Only 2 people are together. That means that one could be replaced by a chatbot, for example. So then the question is, and the chatbot, you can modify the chatbot. The chatbot might know about the goals, and then this 2-person interaction the chatbot might be able to tune the group behavior, that's a zillions of question marks are here, in a direction when the group performance will be better. because this group personality can be used to predict the group performance. These are just 17 groups, not a big statistics, but there are basically 2 outliers. Where is my cursor? Okay. These are mainly just 2 outliers. Others are typically on very close to this line, which shows the group performance and the predicted, the true group performance and the predicted group performance, because the group performance was judged by external observers, given what they came up with. And as I mentioned, the same prediction does not work for self-assessment. Self-assessment is not a good predictor of good performance, and because they come together and they do something together. And also, the group effect estimation does not work. That also means that if you want to make a good group, then you need to find out the personality of the group, and then if they work together, it's important to know how efficient they will be, what the group personality will become. And I mentioned this also works for the dyadic case. So I also already mentioned this, that may help to improve performance during patient-avatar dyadic interaction by modulating the personality of the avatar partner. And there are people who are dealing with avatar personality. One of our partners is Fabrizio Nunari at the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence. He is working on developing avatars with different personalities. So this could be a direction for going further to see how a given avatar will behave, how a person will behave with a given avatar, and how modulating the avatar might change the personality and the performance. These are just totally open questions with relatively hard experimentations. Let me go to the applications, what we have been dealing with. One of them is human body pose estimation. That's very important for physical rehabilitation, something I showed before that there could be a market there. And in this case, we need a precise pose estimation and error minimization during or after the task execution using only 2-dimensional, the camera, only a 2-dimensional camera. It's only a 2-dimensional pixel space, not more. And we are using different tools from the internet and from our own developments. MatTraps is one of the good ones. MediaPipe from Google, that's also very good. Expose can be used to estimate the avatar of the person. And then there are new transformer models also, of course. Whenever there's something with a history, then transformers are also tried, and then they work better. Somebody's walking on the And the result is that we have a relatively precise 2 to 4 centimeter joint estimation, position estimation, provided the partner is guided to the right place relative to the camera, and also the direction of the partner is proper. That requires some help from the computer, some navigational methods. So this is the full architecture. The components are ready, but we haven't put those together, but we could in a mobile application. And one of the important parts is in the right corner, upper right corner, where the avatar is matched to the person. In this case, the person is an expert, is a physical therapist. And we can do the video recording of the expert, and then to add the avatar model. And then having the avatar model, the patient can look at the avatar model from any direction, from up, from down, from the left, from the right, from the side, from the front, from the back. We can have a better understanding, especially if it is compared with the patient's own movement, to see the errors. Because the patient will have a different angle than what we were taking, but the avatar, just the video couldn't do that, but the avatar model is sufficient for that. Then, taking the patient's avatar model, then we can find the best place in the apartment using the semantic map, where to put the camera, where to where to put the patient, to ask the patient to go. Then with the verbal interaction, we can also tell it. And we can also change the direction of the patient by verbal interaction. Things are there, the dialogue is there, but we haven't tried it in real life, only experiments on the computer. It works pretty well on the laptop in a virtual environment, but it could be very different in real life. So this is about the dialogue. And also there are pre-recorded suggestions for error corrections. And then what's relevant that the database can be collected, because using the avatar model, everything is anonymized. So then we can collect a larger database with nothing, not the environment, not the patient, nothing will be known using the avatar model. So this is an option to collect the database. And all the components are there, but putting them together is a considerable amount of work.
Is it necessary to limit this to video, because in physical exercises there is more useful data, maybe some sensors on the muscles, etc. Can that be done, or does it have to be limited with video?
Okay, so we are collaborating with a clinic called Emineo Clinic, and at that clinic they do total knee replacement and total hip replacement. And then the success of the therapy, up to 50% depends on the precision of the exercises. So those exercises should be very precise and errors should be corrected. Otherwise, the hip or the knee replacement will not work properly. In this case, the precision is necessary, and then you cannot estimate. So I went back to playing table tennis, and after about, I don't know how many lectures, exercises, I learned that when I do this, I'm not holding my knee, my elbow properly. It should be held by this. But I did not know, I did not see it on the other people, they did not tell me, but no, this is the simplest motion, and this is the most simple, and this is the second simplest motion, and where your elbow is at, that's very different in just playing lightly. And I could not notice it, I could not discover it. So yes, that 2 to 4 centimeter precision is needed, if this was the question.
No, I'm asking, did they try some other sensors, like whole body sensors for muscle tension, etc., or does it just have to be video?
It doesn't have to be video.
Okay.
You could use just sensors you could use the gyro sensor for the gyro or sensor, for example, if you want, or acceleration sensors, because the distances are given and those are precise. But the gyro sensors might drift, but that doesn't necessarily mean. I don't know their precision, I know that they are used in several cases.
You don't work at this stage at all, you just work with
No, I don't, but I know a group at Delft which is working with such sensors. And I have seen, again, such a tool set somewhere else, but that was just imprecise. But the technology is developing. And in this case, I'm thinking about the smartphone, simply because then everything is given on the smartphone if I can do the pose estimation, because the smartphone can talk to me. So speech is there, the microphone is there, the computer is there, it's a strong computer. If I can do it with video, then nothing else is needed. There's no additional cost. This is the only reason. But there's a company at Graz, Tyromotion. They are using specific sensors, motion sensors, for a very similar purpose. So this was again a good question. So the manipulation and the interaction, what the person is doing, and also the mood, and what is the goal, and what help is needed, and the composite AI is combining different networks, And the top two lines are about the ELA database. This is what we were analyzing. And then the estimation of the hand pose is relevant in all of these cases. The hand configuration, what's in the hand. And that's a combination, these 5 parts eventually give rise to a relatively precise hand pose estimation in 3 dimensions. This is a combination of different methods, including tracking, including a hand model, and a few other things. So we need to estimate the upper body in order not to mix the 2 hands and the wrists together. And the head detector trained with the tracked samples. And hands also need to be detected. This is again MediaPipe, a very good set of software tools. And the tools that we use here must agree. If they don't agree, if there's a part where they don't agree, then we use the tracking in between. We start from so-called islands where we are certain that the detection is okay. And then between them, if they disagree, then we use tracking methods. And then eventually, when we are sure that we could detect the hand properly and we could track the hand so it's not a mixture or not something bad, then we use this 3D hand configuration estimation. And I would like to show you how complex the problem is again, using our technology in a specific case of simple construction task of an autistic diagnostic test. Here the goal is to help on the lack of psychiatrists, trained psychologists and psychiatrists doing this ADAS test. ADAS is Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule. This is this ADAS is standing for. ASD is for Autistic Spectrum Disorder. And the construction task is a very simple task. The person is supposed to put together just such very simple M-like, letter M-like figures into as a puzzle. So they get a piece of paper with the final form in that, which should be filled in with these M-like things. And these are blue and black. And there's a trick here that the person said, I will give you some of these, put them together, fill in the part in the paper. But the psychologist is giving just a few, an insufficient number of such puzzle pieces. So the person is supposed to ask for more. And that leads to interaction. And the question is how the person is asking back for getting more. What is needed here is the body tracking. In this case, the body tracking is relatively simple to tell who is who. That's a kind of diarization problem. And then we have several samples that we can analyze. So it means the identification of the person with deep face, tracking with some tracking method and by track, and there's 3D body pose estimation using either MATLAB or MediaPipe, just like before. And then we need to estimate the hand pose, again the same way that we did before, but now with the objects in hand also, which makes it a little bit harder. And then we need to recognize these objects in the hand to know whether the person picked it up, put it somewhere else. This is the PuzzleNet software. That's a very simple software that we use. And then the question is on the interaction, how the person is asking for getting more. And there are different ways for asking. In this case, the person is not asking verbally, just puts up the hand. This is a specific case, but there are many other possibilities, like in this case, a verbal feedback, verbal request. In this case, what I showed you, that's the hand. In this case, the girl shows that she needs 2 more. And in this case, the girl just grabs it without saying anything. Okay, and we need to recognize all of these. And then, having all of those, including the head pose and this puzzle in the hand, also we need to give the score. So we need the body pose estimation, hand pose estimation, object estimation, object in the hand, and also the request, which could be verbal or could be just gestural. And then to give the score. So it's having many, many different units for a very simple interaction that we could understand without any effort. Here's another example. This is the demonstration task where this girl is told what she's supposed to do. She's supposed to show how she's brushing her teeth. They show the sink on the table. There's nothing there. They show also where the tap is at, where the toothbrush is at, and where the toothpaste is at. And then she's supposed to show how she's brushing her teeth, and she's supposed to tell what she's doing. And in this case, you need to provide a score. And what you see that they tell it to her, and she gets a bit angry and anxious while listening. You can recognize it. We did not measure in this case. And also, this is where the sink is at. This is where the tap is at. This is the this is the toothbrush and the toothpaste. And then she's quite worried, and then she decides to do that. And you need to follow it. She puts toothpaste on the toothbrush. Then she's brushing her teeth. I'm making sense of what she's doing. Spits, drinks, and then at the end she doesn't spit. But she did not say anything. Then you need to provide a score for all the production here. What she did, she left out a few options like putting water into the glass. That was the other thing, the tap and the glass. But then she put water and she drinks from the cup, and she did not say anything. The score should be according to specific scores in order to simplify the task for the psychiatrist or psychologist, or at least to mention what, without the score, what was detected and what was not detected. And of course, brushing the teeth, that requires a 3D estimation from the 2D video. The last one is about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression and anxiety, which is under construction right now. This is here what we could do is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is using homeworks, like when the person is supposed to write a diary. Because if you can verbalize the trauma and what your feelings are, what your related feelings are, that already helps a lot. But people sometimes do that, sometimes dislike to do that, so in order to make it better, interaction with the avatar is better. It helps according to the literature. In addition, a veteran, a warrior, does not like to talk to a psychiatrist who is typically a female, because she's supposed to be strong. So in PTSD, many more females are going to the doctor than males would go. At the same time, males are just much more open to the machine. The machine can also help to them in writing the diaries. And also some thought recording with the so-called Socratic questioning technique could be very useful. I hope that you might be a little bit interested in this, because I will show you an example. Because simplest chatbot that you can imagine. And this thought recording is good for finding out the maladaptive thoughts of the person who is blaming himself or herself, or having some overgeneralization of the situation. And what this is that, for example, there are some cases, like this is one case, which was made up, that you are walking on the street and you are waving to people and they don't wave back to you, and then how do you feel about it? And if the answer is that I'm happy, then they don't go any further. But if the answer is that I'm angry or I'm sad, it made me sad, then it goes further with the Socratic questioning, which is very, very simple. When I say chatbot, it's not a chatbot, but let's see. So then the question is that this question is given. Which automatic thought might have caused you to feel this way in this situation? There's nothing about the question. You can ask it every time when the person says that he was sad or she was sad. And there is an answer there. They don't like me enough to wave back. Then again comes a question which has nothing about what the person said is given. And why would it be it, whatever you said, upsetting to you if, and then you repeat what was there, were true? Or what would it mean to you? What would it say about you? And then the answer is, I may be unlikable. Then it goes further to dig deeper. We are this Socratic question is trying to go deeper in your thoughts. Then again, the question is why and how and what it means to you. And then eventually, maybe, in this specific example, it did happen that if I'm unlikable, then I won't have friends and will be alone all my life. That's the main maladaptive thought of this person coming from that simple, they did not wave me back. And that's a typical, having different similar situation, you will end up with this one, and this is what needs to be cued. And then again, this
Would it be upsetting to the person to get the same question over and over again? I think that would be upsetting.
No, because it's always...
repeats all the things all the time.
Don't ask me. This is what has been used in order to dig deeper. Okay. And you need to think about it. And since you need to think, you might not notice that the question is the same. And you can change those 3 sentences if you want. You can paraphrase it because that's easy with the present-day natural language processing methods. If you want, you can do that. But you can already tell that the system would like to get deeper in your thinking, so might have similar questions to dig deeper. I don't know how they...
Why does it know when to stop asking the same?
It stops after 3. It's given.
Okay.
And then the last one is again without any connotation about what was said, that what would you do in the situation if anything? And then depending on the answer, that the expert might be able to tell that the person is overgeneralizing, because that can happen, or it's a better situation, the solution is good or it's bad, but that goes to the expert. So this type of, in quotation mark, chatbot does nothing but collect information about the person, and then you can do that by, for example, one option is that if they write about the diary, you can also ask about nightmares, for example, or what really happened with the person. And if you get out some part of the speech which could be asked back, then you can do that in the diary itself. This is just made up. These are a specific set of questions which were done in this recent study in 2021 and 2022 at Delft Technical University. And they did it on, how is it called? Preclinical people. So they did some measurements at the beginning in crowdsourcing, and they collected people who had some depression level, did have some depression level, but were not at the clinic yet. And these all, according to them, according to the measurement, it helps in the adherence to the homeworks. Your guess was that it's just the opposite, but it helps in the adherence, in doing the homeworks. And that's relevant for the therapy, success of the therapy itself. And in addition, you get a documentation about how the person is behaving. And these were only in written way. So these are not in chatbots in the original, without speech, but the speech has much, much more information. So for example, it is known that just from the prosody itself, the estimation of depression is better. The change in the level of depression is better than the Hamilton test would give to you. The Hamilton test is a test for the level of the depression, and that's a result from Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Pittsburgh, that the prosody itself gives you information. Depression is also goes together with the PTSD. So prosody, speech, and speech understanding, speech separation, speech understanding would provide much more information to you. What's relevant from the present calls that such a collection of data would be important in, it enables machine evaluation, remote therapy, and cross-border follow-ups. And these cross-border follow-ups could be considerably relevant in the case of the Ukrainian war, for example. In addition, if the system can show some empathy and could relate according to personality, then that also helps adherence. And here is where avatar reaction comes into the picture. And that's again something which would be relevant for the future. And in addition, what natural language processing can give, that just if a sentence was given to you, I mean to the computer, then paraphrasing that sentence, that's simple with relevant natural language processing technology. That goes pretty well with GPT-3, for example. And it could be a clarifying question also. And also it helps the patient to think, feel that the computer understands something, and it helps adherence according to the experiments. And this system is under construction at present. So let me conclude first, and then I go to what we don't have. Things like estimation of body pose, body motion, body talk, head and face, head gestures, I'm reading it. Facial expressions, emotions, eyes, gaze direction, blinking. Blinking is also very important. I can tell you some details on that. Speech and prosody. Speech to text in English, sentiment of the words, hand gestures, hand and object manipulations, and furthermore, human reactions, interaction and collaboration, machine reactions as such, together with the animated avatar, machine chit-chat, rule-based dialogues if it's critical, they could be used in diagnosis and therapy for 24/7. You don't need 1 per week meeting with that system. So what are those things that we are not having, which are also needed? Noise filtering for speech, speaker separation, diarization and biometry, to know that it's the same person who is there, who is treated. Back-channel detection and recognition, because when the computer says something, there are back channels which are relevant, and typically they need to be separated, including nodding, or saying yes, or mm-hmm. And we did that, but let me just go into that a little bit later. Subsequent steps are okay, like speech recognition, that we can use the software Whisper, which is pretty decent in English. And in the case of natural language processing for dialogues, the Bloom or the GPT-J meet the quality of GPT-3, and they are open source tools. We tried this speech separation following some work at Hebrew University from Gaboy and Hoshan, and also, I think, Zimmerman from Oxford. And there are some software tools available. And we tried visually enhanced speaker separation, and this is something which is relevant for diarization and also for personalization of the understanding of what the person is talking. Such fine-tuning for the actual patient or actual person, that could be relevant. I learned that from Catholic University of Leuven, when they trained the robot in the warehouse to speak, to understand the speech of the worker, because those workers have very strong dialogue. They are typically not speaking neither of the languages, but their own. which could be, I don't know, whatever. So their English is pretty bad, but then they train those with several examples, many examples, and then speech-based interaction becomes possible between the robot and the person. But then the diarization, recognition of the person, and a better understanding could be improved if visual enhanced information becomes available, which eventually, after the training, could be neglected. And these are just 3 examples of what we did with the available tools. And I'm not going to show that to you because these are pretty good, but there's no noise background, so then it's not that hard. But in noise and with moving people, it could be much worse. And thank you very much. Oops. Thank you very much for your attention. That was it.
Very much, András. The questions are open, and there is a mic. I don't know if you need it. Do we? Could we use the mic for a question? Okay. So basically, I have a couple of them, but maybe when we were speaking about the group performance, you said that these 2 measures, like that you had in the plot, were correlated to
stability and
somehow to the group performance. What is intriguing me, and I think many people, how much this group performance is given by, let's say, hard skills. This is like the memory, the reasoning, the deduction, the prediction and stuff, and how much it is given by these soft skills, like being able to communicate, to delegate, to lead, to have empathy and stuff like this. And I'm just wondering if there is any way to disentangle this into any like machine-generated or human-generated measurement.
So, if I understand it, I understand the question right. Your question is how to know beforehand, having individual capabilities for empathy, for example, how to be able to predict the group personality, having individual data. Or is your question different from this?
No, that was basically the share of what I would call hard skills of the group, like really the skills of the individual people. For example, there is one that has a super memory, there is another one that knows everything by heart, there is a third one that can do very strong deduction based on some facts. And I would call the second group soft skills. I'm not a psychologist, so maybe the terminology is different. But these soft skills would include how the people are able to cooperate, to communicate, to share the work, and so on. So how do these 2 contribute to the group's success? Mm-hmm. And if you are able to, based on the measurements that you did, to somehow disentangle these two kinds of skills, if it is possible at all, I don't know.
What I know I don't know any database in that direction, and I don't know any results in that direction. The proper partner for that is this Barcelona group, because they have been working deeply and broadly for personalities and for specific emotional descriptors, something that we can also do without the knowledge of psychologist knowledge, but we are doing those using the databases that we train on the ground truth. But in their case, we are software guys with some knowledge about mathematics maybe, and interest in human-machine interaction. But in that group, there are very good psychologists. And now I'm trying to build up the connection with the psychologists, but they might know, no, they will not know, but they might be able to provide the databases and the ground truth for us. And what is seen here that the group interaction is very complex, and the self-assessment is insufficient for predicting performance, and the group perceived personality either. It happens that you can measure. We are asking about additional hidden parameters which would make it possible to predict. There's no database on that. Nothing. You know, people are very complicated, and these 5 parameters are just already a very strong embedding, very strong dimensional reduction, and you are asking for the rest. Whether what is left out, and how could that be used? You are asking the wrong person. I wish if I were knowledgeable enough to know that.
Maybe a related question. So basically in your whole work you are using lots of psychological, psychiatrical knowledge on these tests and so on. So would you have in your team a psychologist directly in your group, or are you always doing it in collaboration with some people from outside? And if so, how do you manage that you speak the common language? Because we have a project, I don't know, is Paya here? No. So we have a project with psychotherapists, and I remember some of the initial meetings about this project, and the language the 2 groups of people spoke was completely different. So how are you doing this?
When I entered the field of, my background is in physics, and I started to work with the control of quantum systems, and there I learned that I should do experiments because computations of 1 picosecond would take 6 hours for me and might not be perfect. At the same time, I can run 1 million experiments in a second, and the molecule would compute the Schrödinger's equations with high precision. It's better to put a learning system onto that. And then I got trapped in AI. But when I entered AI, I learned that people are predicting that 10 years from now, AI will achieve human performance, and never did. So I decided to study a bit the working system, the human brain, that is neuroscience. I have some papers in neuroscience with high-quality researchers. One of them won the Brain Prize, which is something like the Nobel Prize, but given by Denmark. So I learned something there. I'm not an expert, but I can understand. At that time, I also learned some psychology, but I'm not a psychologist, but at least I can be a good interface. So we are not talking the different languages. 10 days ago, I gave a talk at the Psychopharmacologist Congress in Hungary, and they did understand what I was talking. That's okay, because I can try. But I understood what they were asking from me. So this works this way, but you need to have some interface there. And we are not having psychologists in our group, but we are collaborating with psychologists. For example, Thrush Medical School, in autism, our partners are psychologists. In PTSD, also our partners are psychologists. So, and they need the technology. They are not in informatics. In fact, they don't want to know anything about informatics. Now that requires both fields and interfacing, proper interfacing. Otherwise, you go off track very quickly. You get separated very quickly. But this type of interaction is just here. The proper interaction between, at least with the computer, who can tell you that, boy, you should drink a coffee now. I see that you are getting sleepy. From blinking, for example. So drowsiness can be detected. Right now we have a project with Bosch on drowsiness when somebody's driving a car. And then the ground truth is measured by EEG. That's important to get all the proper features. And then from blinking and gaze movement and body movements, we need to infer about the drowsiness and to tell to the driver that you should stop or go for it. And that should be also a type of interaction. You are living with your computer. Your computer could know much more about you than you yourself.
So when you have these detections, there is this video about autism detection. There is a person who's doing some test, like arranging the M characters, and then you have a camera that will detect different actions and see if the person is asking for some more pieces to finish the puzzle. And you have all these different, at least you've shown 4 different categories of asking for a new piece.
Yeah, these are examples.
What if the person uses a different gesture because the person is from a different culture in which you don't have the training data? How would the model handle, or do you have seen such cases? Because when you deploy the system, then you have people from different places, different backgrounds, and different behaviors.
That's a very hard problem, because sometimes just the way how you are willing to interact, that depends. It depends on culture very, very strongly. And also, it's not only the question of detecting such a problem, but also scoring it for the different cultures. And then this system is, this ADAS method is simplified to a level that the different interactions that we need to evaluate is in a very sharp, very short in time interval, when the person used all of the pieces and then the person gets a new piece. Okay, and from the point of view of the computer, the relevant part is to eliminate the false positives. So it's better to say that I know nothing and I am not unable to judge, because this is a new problem, a new situation that I haven't seen, I cannot evaluate, than to say that it was just a verbal interaction, it was just a gesture-based interaction. So the trick here is that, of course, we cannot program everything, but we should exclude the anomalies, the novelties with high precision. So either it falls within one of the categories with relatively high precision, or we say that we don't know, and then we get new examples that the expert will tell us what happened. And then we can either program it or not. But in such cases, precision and the elimination of both false negatives and false positives is very, very important. And then it's up to the psychologist to say how reliable our method is, given the experiments. In this case, we have about 150 videos from Chicago and 200 videos from Qatar. Those are very different cultures. And that we can evaluate, and we can go for different situations. And we have both autistic children and also typically developing children. If that number is insufficient, then they need to collect more. But these are just very specific examples out of a large number of situations where, for example, it happened on one of the videos, just to tell the story, that the person was unwilling to play with this puzzles, was always looking at the camera and seeing the camera is monitoring him, something he doesn't want. And that was a long story, and that was very, very autistic. He was stick to that. He couldn't be, his attention could not be drawn to the actual situation. It's such a very strong behavior, sticking to something. That's also a score that we can analyze and we can also add. So there are many, many little parts. I showed here only the parts that it was put together, but there are additional behavior episodes which need to be noted and also added to the eventual score. But we are not scoring, we are just detecting the episodes, like the person is unwilling and doing something strictly, for example. But that's the story, to collect many, many data on that. And in the case of normal interaction, some group interactions, that's not risky. But the problem with the patients, that's of high risk. You have to be very precise in order to evaluate something.
Can I ask about this, again, this human-computer interaction? So a lot of chatbots and personal assistants, they choose to introduce kind of personality to their assistant and chatbot, like, you know, one is a bit snarky and another is a bit sarcastic, and it works with different success. But do you have any research that actually increases productivity of working with these assistants or not?
No, I don't know. I know that at this DFKI, the German Research Center for AI, they have been developing avatars with different personality, and the method to see efficiency is just not there yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Because that would be interesting, right? Because maybe if the personality of the assistant fits the personality of the person, the interaction would be more effective.
This looks like a crowdsourcing issue with ethical permission, because you will know many things you will learn many things about the person, and very hard to eliminate those data from the evaluators, because you also need the ground truth in several cases, but that's feasible. I looked at the data, how it was collected at Delft, how they got the permission from the internal review board, and yes, it can be done. There are very specific ways to collect the proper crowdsourcing people, and then to do the pre-selection, given some tests if you want, and you can go for just normal people without any specificity, just typically normal, and to try to see for a broader range of personalities or self-assessed personalities, and then to see on specific tasks that need to be designed probably in the form of games. Tasks related to games, join when the avatar and you are working together, and then to modify the personality to see what is helping to a given person, and how, if you can modify the personality of the partner, not the avatar, but the partner, in order to get to better performance. That's a potential present study with crowdsourcing. I think it's very important. And people change their personalities very, very quickly. So I have a friend who is always supporting and helping me and can give me anything I want. But if he happens to play a game, then he becomes a killer, a real enemy. So everything is just task related. Also, it's not only you can change your personality quickly in different situations.
I have one more question about the data. For example, in this case of PTSD, do you somehow try to draw the data from the general population that would represent the normal base case on top of the data that you get from some specific database, let's say from the people that have been subjected to some war or some fight, so that you would increase your data set in such a way that you would have, let's say, a background model of the general population?
In the case of PTSD, what I'm after right now is a three-step procedure. The first one is screening, because having 40 million people in Ukraine, and typically if somebody undergoes a trauma, then 30% of those people will develop PTSD. And the sooner you discover, the better the chances are that that person will be able eventually to overcome this PTSD and will not dig himself or herself very deep, and which could be tragic. So then the first part is screening, and when screening says that there's some potential traumatic situations, then it should go to the expert. In the case of the expert direction, I have a potential partner, which is it's called Adaptive Testing Technology. It's a company, also happens to be in Chicago, and they can measure the level of PTSD or depression very, very frequently, which is not the case for the Hamilton test. Hamilton test has 40 different questions that you are supposed to answer one after the other, and the second time it's already boring for you. The third time it's terrible, you hate it. Same questions again and again, and people don't fill it out, really, they don't even read it, they put numbers there. But what they do, they collected more than 1,000 questions, and they ask one of them, and then depending on the answer, they choose a second question, depending on the answer, and they show that out of 12 questions, which are random, and they change from time to time, they reach the same quality what Hamilton test can reach. And then it's not boring, and you can do it always. And you can also include those questions within the game or somewhere else, so they will not even notice that those you are tested. And that's very important during medical therapy, medication, for example. And that's one thing that, so first, to say that yes, this person needs treatment. Second, having the treatment to make adherence, better adherence to the therapy, which could be diary writing or thought recording. And this thought recording can rely on this adaptive testing technology, because those questions, whether you had whether you had some kind of bad nightmares recently, then you can ask about the nightmare, and then you can do the Socratic question without understanding anything about the nightmare. So then this could have two things: one, to help the therapy by improving the adherence, and also collecting the maladaptive thoughts using this thought recording, this Socratic questioning, which could be given to the therapist again, time to time, and that could help the therapist even if the patient is moving from one country to the other. So that's a measurement of the level, and also there's nothing that this software would do in terms of the therapy, because that's dangerous in the case of PTSD. The expert should have the individual estimations from the ATT, this adaptive testing technology, and also the collection of diaries, and from the diaries the NLP can provide a summary, because those could be very long, so the expert can look through those relatively quickly. And this is an option I'm thinking about. And then, of course, it depends whether it's a child or an adult. It should be very different. It's not worked out how to deal with this problem, but the potentials are here. And it's not a question of measuring the distribution of the general population. It is known that anxiety is increasing in the general population, not only in Ukraine, but because of the life is changing very quickly. And also, including COVID, for example, anxiety has reached a much higher level, I don't know the numbers, than it used to be before. So then to measure that, at the population level, how it's changing, that's a very different story. How to collect data, a screening method could collect data, like diary writing. For example, if there's an application for diary writing, then it is one option. If it can be speech-based, there's a better option, because speech has much more information than the writing itself.
In general, the models that you train here are based on the group of people that you have, right? They're not personalized models where you have longitudinal data, and the model is evaluating a person over time points, right?
You are asking me about the personality?
Yeah, the PTSD as well as things about personality and the autism. Are those like one time point you see those patients at one time point, or you see multiple time points of that person? I would say outside the day. Obviously, the video is like a longer time point.
The ADAS test is a 45-minute test.
Yeah.
And that happens once. You can repeat it, but it will not change too much. The therapy there is to overcome the actual problem of the child. Let me not go. I wanted to go into autism, but let me not do that.
Yeah, maybe not so much as autism, since that it's not time fluctuation, but for example, PTSD, depression particularly. One of the things that's maybe difficult, I think someone else had also mentioned about different cultural groups, right? So you get a problem with that, right? That you have to train on a certain type of group. But also, if you're always training on a group, even within the same culture, for example, like men are more likely to answer questions in an NLP sense, saying like, do you feel depressed? Well, maybe men try to act strong and say, I don't feel like I'm kind of depressed, right? While a woman is maybe more likely to be genuine, all these different things. I feel like all of those things, and from the research that we've done, in psychiatric machine learning, are very difficult to pinpoint. That's why we focus on like longitudinal data and personalized models. Is that something that you have worked in? Because even the Hamiltonian scale, yes, it's been shown in general to be clinically validated. And whenever you go to a new culture, you have to redo the Hamilton Depression Scale or whatever psychiatric or psychological scale. You have to keep on validating it for the specific culture and time period that's in, right? Mm-hmm. So to cancel these subjective things out, we try to focus on personalization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first, it's a very good thing to do the longitudinal testing because it's self-controlled, because you measure the changes in the individual. But I think I made the wrong impression. I'm not doing any experiments there. I'm working with partners and they are doing the experiments. In the case of PTSD, we have a set of Zoom recordings over a shorter time period with different people, but that's not longitudinal either. In the case of autism, there's no reason to do the longitudinal methods. But in the case of PTSD, how it could go, what I'm thinking about, that would be longitudinal, including this ATT, this adaptive testing technology methodology, which is a relatively precise measurement about the actual state. They have different things, including depression, different testing things, depression, PTSD, and anxiety, among other things. Okay, so that should be longitudinal because it could go together with the therapy. In the case of autism, what I'm thinking is to help to the mother in dealing with the child, because then the child has some problems, and then the interaction should be improved. It could be language, could be behavior, recognition of emotions, or whatever. And then the parent is teaching the child, and the psychologist is either teaching the parent or monitoring how the parent is dealing during the session with the child at home. And in that, the psychologist or psychiatrist could be replaced by the computer, a summary could be given. The computer could analyze what's happening, could notice some of the problems, and this could be a real project, but it may not be of interest here, with the Chicago group, because they were planning in therapies at home, remote help to the parents, but then there are very few such psychologists who could spend 1 hour per family per day. But the system could monitor that and could call attention to some specific problems. But we did no longitudinal methods, but this ATT, that's also the name of the company in Chicago, they did. And they did it during medication. And what they said that even they could do it 12 times a day. Sometimes it's important because the medication is strong, then you need to measure and to add, to change the quantity. Please.
Getting back to the data, nowadays awareness is increasing that databases are biased. So, I mean, we know that, for example, people of color are in AI programs more likely to be targeted as possibly criminal. Women are more often excluded in automatic application progressing at Amazon and stuff like this. And I think, so how will you control for these biases in the database? Because when you were speaking about this, for example, the diary summarization with NLP, I guess the system wouldn't see any metadata about the patient, like the gender or the social or cultural background or anything like this, but still from, I don't know, a certain vocabulary or not speaking style, but writing style or something like this, there could be some implicit modeling of a certain vocabulary and some, I don't know, estimations about what type of person this might be that is unintended, but still might be learned by the system. Because
I understand. Again, these are the hardest. Of course, these are the hardest questions, and I have been thinking of that because it's a huge problem. So it happened that a black person was identified as a monkey by one of the Google recognition systems. So these biases will occur. But how to overcome that? Especially, recognizing people, objects and people in the Google software, Google code, and then putting it onto the internet, and it said monkey for a black person. That's terrible. So if they couldn't do that, how would we do it in a much harder situation? That's your question.
Yeah, I mean, there are technically people that have been arrested because
I think that yes, it is dangerous, especially in the case of psychiatry and psychology. So we should be very much aware of that, and we should always rely on the experts. So we will, the intention is to make their life simpler, but we will make their life harder at the beginning. And we should find out the outliers, the anomalies, and we should be very restricted on false positive and false negatives, to narrow the range and to say that no, we don't know. The experts should make the judgment, and then we will get a new example. I see no other way. Also, if you know what is the statistics, then we might know where the scoring is dangerous. So just from the statistics itself, you might be able to say something that we are not sure. However, there's a big problem here, that these deep network technologies can be fooled easily, can make mistakes, especially if they are not trained on a very large database. And here what is relevant is the explanatory power, the explainability. Why the system did something, what was the reason for making a decision. And this is where composite AI helps you, because it is detecting different components, and then the higher level knowledge makes the judgment. And if there is some discrepancy there, then it can reject the evaluation. But this is what I said, for example, in the hand detection and hand configuration estimation, there should be islands where the system is certain, and then in between the tracking should be certain that can help or eliminate the spurious signals. How to do that in the case of psychology and psychiatry? I am for Socratic question. Well, at the beginning, the system should be on the safe side, and then the collected data should be given to the expert. And then your question comes in the summarization, what it will do with the summarization. It should also be checked by the expert eventually, so there is no free lunch here.
But I mean, it's not, we are also biased. Like, we have our biases as well. This is why the systems are working like this, because we invented them. So, and for example, if you see the output of the system and you're like, okay, I know it's from the system and I have to check it and so on and so forth, you will still have your own biases. Maybe you're not so aware, maybe you are aware of them, but still it's easy if the system shows you something that confirms your own biases, and so you wouldn't notice that, yeah, that fits it, because there is such thing as confirmation bias in some cases. I mean, that's not a question that you could answer, I think that's something.
So, being biased, that's a statistical estimation.
Yeah.
So, if I say, for example, that, let me say, okay, the gypsies are stealing, that's a biased situation, and but at the same time, it has a statistical relevance. It is there statistically. So what would you do with that? Amazon has just withdrawn with a software that was estimating the capabilities of people for different jobs. And it has withdrawn it because it turned out that it downgraded females. You might know this story. I don't know what happened there, whether this downgrading was a proper bias according to statistics or not, but how to handle such a bias, that's a political question. If you want to go for the long term and to overcome that bias and enable the behavior which is not proper in the given context, but you want to have people in that situation eventually to overcome the problem. So for example, in the case of the US, the chances for hiring a black person with the same same rate in a given test were higher. They had privileges there in order to overcome the situation and to have more black people in the school, in teaching, for example, at the university. And that's true. So, I mean, you have to do that, and that's a very different decision. So, for example, it does matter whether if you have a shelf in your childhood, what falls from the shelf onto your head? Is it a book or is it a bottle of wine? That's a very different story. So if you can read at an early stage, that your chances of collecting information become much better. If you don't learn, if you don't understand, you don't develop the concept of the line of numbers, that there are orders of differences like 1, 10, 100, 1000 by the age of 7. If this mental line of numbers is not available to you by the age of 7, then you cannot develop it later. Which means that you have to work on adding that knowledge to people at an earlier stage. Somehow, either you decide to interact with those children at an early stage, or they will stay in a case that they will not be able to use mathematics at all. So that becomes a political decision. The question is how you discover this bias. This is basically whether you discover this bias in your evaluating system, and as soon as you discover it, what will you do against it? Is that bias because of a specific data, or is that bias okay? And then you want to do something against that bias which is statistically true. If it's not true statistically, then I'll give you another example. In the case of IQ test, it turns out that for black people, you need to develop a different set of questions. Because you know how IQ tests were developed? They collected groups of people, and they asked them, okay, please order your partners, your members of the group, according to their level of intelligence. Who is the most intelligent, who is the second, third, and so on. And then the person asked, but I don't know what intelligence is. Then the answer would come on. Everybody knows what intelligence is, you should know. Nobody knows what intelligence is about. And then they order them. And then, given that order, they collected the best, I don't know, 40, 100 questions, which correlated, the 40, 100 or 100, many more questions, which correlated the best with that order. So having 40 questions from the best 100 and having your answers, you get an estimation how people would consider you. And this time, because of the way of the collection, should be different from black people and from white people, because they order the intelligence differently. And again, you get, having just average, mostly white people, you will get a bias in the estimation of the IQ. I usually recognize that. Same holds for gypsies, for example. So the way out is to find it and then to decide about it. Whether it's a proper bias because of statistics, or you need to collect more data. And if it's a proper bias, then it becomes a political question. At least this is how I think about it.
Yes, I would propose to close the seminar officially, but we can actually dynamically move to the meeting room, so whoever wants to continue discussing with András, also some possible cooperations, is welcome. And
thank you very much.
So here in the lecture room, it's over. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks also to the student union and our young colleague for the technical support and for renting us the room. I see actually some